Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on creating a nucleus of universal brotherhood. And next week the topic will be true morality. Please also note that we meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. Our lodge, United Lodge of Theosophists, is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the ending keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Even if the good of mankind only is considered by thee, the performance of thy duty will be plain. For whatever is practiced by the most excellent man, that is also practiced by others. The world follows whatever example they set. There is nothing, O son of Pritha, in the three regions of the universe, which it is necessary for me to perform, nor anything possible to obtain which I have not obtained, and yet I am constantly in action. If I were not indefatigable in action, all men would presently follow my example, O son of Pritha. If I did not perform actions, these creatures would perish. I should be the cause of confusion of castes, and should have slain all these creatures. O son of Bharata, as the ignorant perform the duties of life from the hope of reward, so the wise man, from the wish to bring the world to duty and benefit mankind, should perform his actions without motives of interest. He should not create confusion in the understandings of the ignorant, who are inclined to outward works, but by being himself engaged in action, should cause them to act also. All actions are affected by the qualities of nature. The man deluded by ignorance thinks, I am the actor. But he, O strong-armed one, who is acquainted with the nature of the two distinctions of cause and effect, knowing that the qualities act only in the qualities, and that the self is distinct from them, is not attached in action. And now for today's talk.
Thank you, friends. Neoplatonists and great Theosophist Plotinus taught that soul, being of a nature different from the things which it adorns, which it moves, causes to live, is necessarily more honorable than these. For these are corrupted when soul deserts them, and generated when it supplies them with life. But soul always exists, because it never deserts itself. Associated is the higher self, which is the reality beyond manifestation. Law is the reality in manifestation. The idea of law requires perception of the inner connectedness and ultimately of the essential identity of all who are ruled by and act in accordance with the same law. In time, through cycles and extension in space, the self exhibits its aspect of the many selves. There is no other conceivable way in which the self can manifest. From this, the delusion arises that the self is not one, but many, that life in place and time is a real existence. Humanity is a great being who suffers from this delusion. The knowledge which comprehends both the self and the law is summed up in a single word: brotherhood. One who would be brother to his fellows has heard the voice of the silence speaking in his heart. One who acts in brotherhood has used his mind to articulate the love he feels. As all of us have hearts and minds, so we all can be brothers. The tragedy is that so few listen to their hearts and are guided by their minds. So acting, man becomes a Buddha. The doctrine of the oneself and that of the great law are really one teaching. Knowledge of the law conducts us to realization of the self. Realization of the self brings action according to law. If men could be brought to see the consequences of their own action to themselves and others, much of the suffering of the world would cease at once. Not until he had seen death, decay, sickness, and error did Prince Siddhartha rise from his couch of ease, his dream of loveliness, and go forth to solve the mystery of existence. There was a man who could not enjoy while others wept, whose youth was a mockery if others tottered in decrepitude. The Buddha could not separate himself from all the rest. Ordinary men have not a Buddha's sense of selfhood, but they have it in a smaller measure. The suffering caused by ignorance is far greater than that deliberately imposed. The average man is a good man. He recoils from actions which bring pain to his fellows when he realizes what he has done. Theosophists of this age are charged with the responsibility of forming the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity. A nucleus is not the whole body, but it determines the form which the whole body takes. It is a point from which radiate lines of force and to which unorganized material is attracted. They are receiving a pattern. The nucleus, the germ of the human body, is but a single cell, while the body has millions. The contrast is really not one of number. Our wonder at the power of the germ arises simply because it gives pattern and purpose to the whole. The germ of brotherhood does the same for the millions of unorganized members of the great body of humanity. The germ provides the lines of force, and nature does all the rest. The germ of brotherhood can establish the living truths of self and law, around which all men will aggregate in one ordered whole, as crystals form in a solution according to a pattern which is at first hidden from the eye, as the seed unfolds its mystery in root and stem and leaf. Theosophy is itself the heart and hand of nature. Nature reveals to all who study her what are the work and the powers of a nucleus. From both we gain guidance and encouragement. Life discloses to us unity in diversity. Living, moving intelligence which eternally is building, preserving, and destroying in order to build anew. Bodies, thoughts, desires, and ideals, all these suffer continuous change and reorganization. All reflect the action of nuclear power, whatever the state or the plane. Its forces in spirit and idea is not diminished because invisible to the senses. An embryo is not remarkable for itself, but for what it will become. The marvel of the nucleus is disclosed by the full cycle of development, by the unfolding before our eye of its hidden promise. If the seed could doubt its power, it would not develop. The brotherhood of man will grow as surely as flower from seed, if there is a nucleus of men to hold unswervingly to that great ideal and conscious faith in the law they have invoked, and constant devotion to the body they would bring to life. Just as a person passes through periods of idealism and of materialism, as is inspired to creation, so the cycle of civilization swings between the manifested opposites of complexity and simplicity, of expansion and assimilation. Ages of great individuals are succeeded by ages of the great masses. The Theosophical movement does not reflect these transitions so much as it anticipates and balances them. The growth of organizations does not necessarily mean the growth of man as a thinking, creative being. There are two entities in every person: the spirit which creates ideas, and the personal man who attempts to embody these ideas in a lasting form. Man, the creator, may inaugurate organizations, but it is not man, the creator, through whom they are perpetuated. The personal man seeks security in forms. But for the spirit, forms are only an imprisonment, not lasting, vital expansion. Consider the traditional trinity of church, school, and home. Do they answer the needs of the aspiring soul, or do they contribute rather to its further imprisonment? Ideally, this trinity represents the agents that complete the incarnation of every person on earth. True religion, true education, and a true family life provide the conditions and incentive for the full development of the moral, the intellectual, and the psychic man. But there is a distinction between the true religion and the church, and between true education and the school. It is the same distinction as that between spirit and form. The spirit of man cannot be lighted by forms. The spark of the incarnating soul is turned to a flame only by contact with other souls. That contact cannot, by its very nature, be formalized. Spirit cannot be externalized and still remain spirit. There is a difference between the picture of a few persecuted Christians, a mere handful of earnest seekers of the right, and their multiplied successes, now no longer persecuted, it may be, because they no longer seek so earnestly. The few had become the many, and a new minority was needed to rescue the banner of spirit that had been captured and surrounded by the army of form. We may well regret the passing of the humble forms, awkward and inefficient, perhaps, but imbued with a lofty spirit of pioneering. Possibly something was learned in the little red schoolhouse of yesteryear that is not to be found in the complicated labyrinth of the modern educational system. Religion has long since reached a high point in its development as an organization. The education establishment seems to have also followed suit in its quest to attain perfection of its form, as has been painfully brought to our attention by classroom teachers, burdened by rules placing standardization over developmental needs of individual students. The family is the primary environment, both physical and spiritual. It is only in the light of a person as a soul in evolution that the true function of the family can be understood. This is the teaching of Theosophy, and this is the significance of the United Lodge of Theosophists. For like the family, ULT is not a form, but an essence. The intangible product of an association of souls bound together by a common karma for a common purpose. The family is the origin of the human social being, and there the problems arising between nations and races can be met and solved in miniature. The lessons of family karma are not different from those of national or racial karma, but their immediacy makes them easier to understand and at the same time harder to avoid. Our general preoccupation with matter and the forms of matter have allowed the subtle skandhas of materialism to penetrate into the home, where dwells the primary and natural nucleus of the force of evolution, the point at which the soul, the individual, first merges with and becomes the human being, the social person. Neither the plant nor the man can mature simply through the impelling force of life within itself. No more can man progress alone. The plant needs the aid of all nature, in which it is a part of the sun, the earth, and the air, so man too needs the aid of his kind. Science would make man the product of physical heredity and environment, but it is the soul of man carrying forward its self-created spiritual heritage that incarnates through heredity into a subtle karmic environment. It is said that the sage adheres to his obligations, but does not exact fulfillment from others. The person who has virtue attends to the spirit of the compact. The person without virtue attends to his claims. And Gautama Buddha said, quote, "Do not believe in guesses, that is, assuming something as haphazard as a starting point, and then drawing conclusions from it, reckoning your 2 and your 3 and your 4 before you have fixed your number 1. During the period of incarnation on earth, man is forever under the necessity of choosing between 2 paths. These 2 paths are not to be considered as external roads with clearly marked signposts pointing the way one desires to go. The journey of the soul is internal, and the duality of its course grows out of the twofold nature of the human mind. Higher and lower among us forever present the ego with a choice between those better and dearer duties and activities which should stand as number 1 in our lives, and the manifold lures and temptations of the personal self. Only in the true devotee does that which one ought to do coincide with that which he would like to do. For other travelers on the path, duty and preference may all too often be in conflict. To those who draw their hope and inspiration from the philosophy of Theosophy, the writings of HPB should ever hold the position of primacy in their lives. To those who profess loyalty to the program of masters, the first object of the original Theosophical Society must stand as number 1 in their theosophical aims and endeavors. Without the first, the second and the third objects are mere pretensions. Except on the basis of the first, all else that is achieved by way of growth and development must turn to dust and ashes in the mouth. It is not the preeminent status of the first object in the minds of the founders, shown by the fact that even in the earliest days of the society, assent to this object alone was the sole requisite for membership. And might it not be, for this reason also, the absolute necessity of building a firm foundation that spiritual teachers in all ages have admonished their disciples to make sure of their number 1 before reckoning their 2s and 3s and 4s. The 3 objects of the original Theosophical Society are as follows, and they're right here on the board. First, to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Second, the study of ancient and modern religions, philosophies, and sciences, and the demonstration of the importance of such study. And third, the investigation of the unexplained laws of nature and the psychical powers latent in man. Many there be among students of Theosophy who make great strides in the comparative study of ancient and modern religions, philosophies, and sciences, the second object. Numerous are the dabblers in occult phenomena and the psychic powers latent in man. Their understanding of the purpose of the third. Legion are the writers and lecturers on such strange and mysterious subjects as the logoi, akasa, the hierarchies, and the distant occult lodges of adepts. But of all these who profess loyalty to HPB and her mission, how many really know the meaning of the first object? How many have taken time even to look up the definition of the word nucleus, so as to comprehend more fully its nature, place, and function in the organism? And knowing these things, how many make it the grand objective of their theosophical work to help in forming the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity, so that tolerance, peace, and goodwill may spread upon the face of the earth? According to a dictionary, nucleus is defined as a center of development, central mass, kernel, the apex, or earliest formed part. A round or oval body embedded in the protoplasm of a cell. Metabolism, growth, and reproduction are carried on by means of this organ, the central part around which additional parts are formed. Might it be that, in our desire to be universal, we have forgotten the place and function of the nucleus? Is it possible that in our eagerness to expand and to spread Theosophy to the 4 points of the compass, we have tended to neglect the center of development upon which alone true expansion can be achieved? Can it be that by running here and there and by scattering our energies, we daily and hourly spoil or impair the central part around which additional parts may be formed and through which alone metabolism and reproduction may take place? In the minds of some theosophists, the peculiar wording of the first object presents an apparent contradiction. How, it is asked, can a person be universal and at the same time make himself an inconspicuous part of a nucleus embedded in the protoplasm of a cell? How is it possible to be universally great and nuclearly small at one and the same time? For the first object does not require of any person that he be universal. In our present state of ignorance, we could not do that even if we wanted to. But every one of us can help to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity. And in this humble task, the person who stays in his center is far more likely to succeed than the one who runs about. For to run about is those who might possibly help, we again forsake our present duty, while at the same time the opportunity for applying the principle of universal brotherhood is ever and equally present at home. Some have thought that to uphold the first object of the movement, they must travel to distant lands, mingle with different races, shake hands with strange peoples. Others are of the opinion that the practice of universal brotherhood demands that they patronize and support all existing cults and creeds. And there are many. Under the guise of broad-mindedness, such individuals might follow the practice of attending church on Sunday mornings and sitting in the circle of their favorite yogi in the afternoon, while in the evening they listen to a lecture on Theosophy. With all due respect for the motives of such devotees and for the inalienable right of every human soul to choose the manner of their devotion, it may well be that they would do better to stay in one place, especially insofar as the formation of a nucleus is concerned. Which place that shall be, of course, is up to the individual's own choosing. Brotherhood on the wing does not reach very deep into the human heart and consciousness. It is easy to be brotherly toward strangers, toward people with whom we associate only on occasion. The first object of the movement of Theosophy calls for something far more difficult: the daily and hourly attitude of charity, love, and right feeling toward those with whom we work and live. It calls for the conscious and purposeful cooperation of people, of men and women, of different types and nationalities, whose karma has brought them together under the banner of Theosophy. It is only by working together, by mutual assumption of responsibility, mutual forbearance of each other's faults, mutual assimilation of each other's virtues, that the spirit of brotherhood can be confirmed and made real. The theosophical ideal of universal brotherhood would be of small value indeed if it meant that we must go out looking for people toward whom to feel brotherly. Consider the great mass of human beings who are bound down by duty, who find themselves under the yoke of responsibility to family, business, and community. What promise does the first object hold for them? It is the firm conviction of many students of Theosophy that one of the chief purposes of H.P. Blavatsky and Masters in idealizing the nucleus was to give hope and consolation to these people of duty, to show them that their labors are not in vain. The first object was not intended to send people traveling about all over the world, but to instill the feeling of contentment in the hearts of those who must stay at home. Its purpose is to create love and respect for simple duty, to set a pattern for brotherly cooperation in the humblest walks of life. There are too many people who wish to be universal and to roam. Too few are willing to settle down to the inconspicuous task of forming a nucleus. Can there be health and vitality in any cell, whether it be that of an atom, a family, or a community, without a continuing mass of living substance at its center, which provides the basis for inward and outward osmosis? Can there be a metabolism, growth, and reproduction in a theosophical organism without the sacrifice of those who are willing to submerge their personalities in the hidden nucleus around which additional parts may be formed? Fortunately, among the mass of human beings attracted by the power of the theosophical movement, there are those who hold the nobler view, nucleus formans. But these are not to be found among those who cry, "Lo here and lo there," who are always on the go, nor among the growing number of, quote, leaders who seek to attract attention to themselves. Nucleus-forming theosophists are those who are fixed in their number one, who stay in their places, maintaining centers of work. Without them, even the shoppers would have no place to go nor to return to. True, they are usually criticized as being self-centered and unfraternizing, so much wrapped up in their work, you see, that they know not what goes on in the world. But so is the nucleus of a cell, self-centered and wrapped up in its work, though we would hardly say it is ignorant of its true dharma. Nucleus-forming theosophists are those who, in the words of the secret doctrine, seek to constitute themselves, quote, the spiritual potency in the physical cell that guides the development of the embryo and which is the cause of the hereditary transmission of faculties and all inherent qualities. They are the living spiritual plasma of a universal brotherhood of humanity on earth. Here be a quote from HPB. It is only when the nucleus is formed that the accumulations can begin. That will result in the future, however far, and the formation of that body which we have in view. And another quote from Saint Exupéry. He's a French writer and adventurer. Quote, there is no comradeship except through union in the same high effort. Even in our age of material well-being, this must be so. Else how should we explain the happiness we feel in sharing our last crust with others in the desert? All of us, in words that contradict each other, express at bottom the same exalted impulse. What sets us against one another is not our aims. They come to the same thing, but our methods, which are the fruit of our varied reasoning. Mr. Judge notes that to join a branch of the Theosophical Society is to add another to the ranks of a great movement, thus increasing power and sympathy. One's next step is to try to comprehend the doctrines and then to theosophize as much as possible your friends and neighbors, not necessarily to convert them into members, but to show them what one himself believes to be true. That is the aim of Theosophy, for the society was started to try and get people with one accord to find out truth by first cultivating the idea of universal brotherhood. In the Path, it was the magazine Mr. Judge started, we are trying to point out the road to all sincere thinking people. If studied with care, one should gain from it. No one can really be told anything. They may be told 1,000 times, and not being ready, do not understand. We must try to understand with the heart, and from within a light will begin to shine, which will clear up doubts and darkness. In the Key to Theosophy, HPB begins her discussion of the objects of the Theosophical Society with a direct statement. They are three and have been so from the beginning. Several versions of the objects appear as HPB explains the working system of the Theosophical Society, but evidently a distinction has to be drawn between the objects of the movement and the aims perceptible from time to time by any single member of the TS, from the president down. For those who have been confused by changed objects, Mr. Judge and others gave clarity, noting that the original objects, which is here, as well as the lines laid down, are from the masters of wisdom and have never been changed. We'll stop here. There's quite a bit to go, but I think the essence has been put out for questions and comments. And we'll probably hit on a lot of the rest in that area. Yes.
Well, since all the ULTs are spread worldwide, and there are those nucleus formers in each center, would you then say that the nucleus has been formed? Because HPP also initiated that process while she was here on Earth.
Well, the nucleus at the spiritual level is and ever shall be. And there are centers throughout the world which will continue to exist and have existed since immemorial time immemorial, and will exist forever. Individual centers may come and go, but that world unity is going to be there. So that's the nucleus. I think that's this been talked about here. And we, the nucleus formers, are trying to make that obvious in the world. It comes and goes in individual lodges. Some lodges do well, some don't. Some go out of existence, really. But that nucleus is still there, and never will be. The masters, the brotherhood or the masters, will never allow that to go away. Does that help? So the nucleus is there. It always has been there. The question was raised is whether this should be nuclei, and this student doesn't think so. It's the nucleus. We're continuing to form that nucleus on the material plane, and that will ever be as well, because we have a lot of work to do, as is quite obvious by looking at society.
Mm-hmm. I heard that organized religions unite, but they also divide.
Mm-hmm.
How is Theosophy different?
Real Theosophy is very different, because real Theosophy is the truth. But theosophical groups, they're all different kinds. I mean, there are groups that have changed the objects of the original
Movement.
yeah, from the original, simply because of personal, people trying to make themselves important and things like that, So in that regard, Theosophy is no different than religion. True religion is the same too, because when you take away all of the man-made stuff in it, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity or Islam, it's the same. But the nucleus we're talking about is that search for the truth, which is a ever evolving process too.
The second part of my question: is universal brotherhood extended to people without the same values as the students of Theosophy, like for example outlaws, or is just extended to people living ethically and morally?
We have Theosophists in all walks of life that don't never heard the word, so it's boundless. But when you're talking about a nucleus and groups getting together for similar values, that's a little bit different story. I think that's where you're going,
So,
getting you with your
universal
question.
brotherhood does not discriminate.
Does not discriminate. In those who come together with similar values, yeah, you have different opinions and stuff like that. But they need to recognize that in working for this goal, we have to set aside our personal beliefs and so forth. But yeah, it extends all over the world to everyone. Mm-hmm.
So in ULT's declaration, we have universal brotherhood as part of it. And here we say objects of the original TS was this. How does ULT incorporate, or these three into its organization? Because the declaration doesn't specify these just like this. It's different, but I guess the spirit is the same.
Well, these are the objects. The declaration is the same thing in different words. It follows the lines of these three. If that kind of gets at your question.
It does.
It's nothing in the declaration that doesn't support those three right there. And it also says, I think near the bottom of the program that we put out every quarter, these are the three objects, but they also with the declaration along with it. And it follows along the lines. But this is not a, quote, UOT declaration. We follow this, okay? But this should be, you know, all theosophists, but there's some theosophists, you know, are in different states of mind, I guess you might think. But there's only a few. HPB talks and says this is dedicated to the few, and I think she's talking about the nucleus when she says this. What she says it here, right in the front. Dedicated to the few is what she says. Anyway, I don't see the words right now, but it's there. Oh, there it is right here, after the preface. Those are the words. And I think she's talking about the nucleus. But there's a lot of confusion when you go out to these general meetings as to what this nucleus means. And the shallowness of some interpretations of that is out there. That's why it's so important that we try to remember that there are those among us who are very serious about this and try their best to stay on target.
During HPB's time, she said that the Theosophical Society had become a sham, worse than other organizations.
Exactly. Yeah.
And she said, in order to fulfill this first object, she established the esoteric section of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that even if we don't know one another, still, if you have the same aim and purpose, you're still working for humanity through the same object. And your statement is that without the first, which is the formation of this universal brotherhood, the second and third is of no value,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't add to anything.
You're right.
Well,
it's the attitude of mind, which is, you have to have the right attitude of mind here. And then all this else is associated with that. But some will try to pick out one bit of piece and make that a starting
the
point.
focal point.
That's why I think, as the Buddha said, you don't just do arbitrarily start somewhere, because that's what they're doing by grabbing a piece here and ignoring the first one. That's what they're doing. They're starting somewhere in the middle, and then you go off on a tangent that way, like that. You don't out of curiosity study religions to see what different people believe, but get an understanding of what the common basis is of those religions. Because it's easy to go off on a tangent without doing that.
But what you have listed there would take more than one lifetime to understand from those books. And a lot of people have the idea that it is of no value to read those books. But if we read it and reread it, we understand that HPB did a lot of work, because she traveled all over the world, she collected the data,
Right.
and she put it in written form so that we wouldn't have to go gallivant around looking for it. Besides,
she did it at basically a dictation of the masters sometimes, the students understand.
Besides, she says to us that it is extremely difficult to find those resources because they're not really available in the public libraries, the old
Exactly.
works. Yet she quotes from them all over the place, so she obviously had access to it, whether it be from the Master's Lodge or on the astral light she got it and put it in those books. This student does not know a whole lot about other religions, but I learned from that book because she compares it. She shows the validity and compares it to the validity of the other one, but she also has the courage to say, this is the mistake and this needs to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
She does not show favoritism towards a single one of them or excludes any major religion from that book.
She does not.
She does not.
And
And
I think that a lot of people in those religions get turned off by some statements, you know, because she didn't mince anything. She
No.
just told it like it was.
she's telling the truth.
And you know, we have all these various people coming in and, oh, she said that. That's terrible. No more theosophy for me. You know,
No, that's
and
not an open mind.
that's
That's a
person
closed
with
mind.
a closed mind. So, in forming that nucleus, people choose not to be in the nucleus rather than to be, you know, excluded from it. They exclude themselves if they have such close minds.
But in this century, I think the mind is has opened to its own possibilities because it perceives at a higher level, thanks to the movement of the 19th century and all the struggles we have gone through the 20th. However, people seem to be oscillating again. They're not quite sure where they belong and how they should behave.
Humanity continues to oscillate. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
good word to use. And I mean, that's what this is. This is to try to help us focus. You know, and it takes a lot of work, as those who have been involved in this movement, in this lifetime. Obviously, they've been involved before too, but they come in and you see that it's very, very challenging because you're among the few who try to do this.
But by the same token, there's one part of your statement this student does not agree with.
Okay.
When HPB brought this message from her masters, not hers, but everyone's, the master's lodge, she brought it for the general humanity,
Mm-hmm.
especially the poor and the unforgotten part of humanity, because she tells us that it's always that section that is mistreated by the knowledgeable portion of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
However, she does say that she established the current for the 21st century as well as the 20th. So if we do not follow in their footsteps and we're diverging from it, is that current available to you? This student does not think that it is.
No,
Because if you do
not while you diverge. You can always get back in it, perhaps, if it's more difficult to get back in it than to stay in it.
Perhaps you would allow me to finish my
Sure,
comment.
I'm sorry.
If the current is necessary that we actually follow the message, accept the messenger and her colleague as the true ones that brought it out, then how does that leave a space for accepting other things on the basis of brotherhood?
Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about, what you're saying, and this student did not intend to give that impression. Everyone has the opportunity, but unless you focus on the message and on the truth, okay? And when you got all these variative opinions and beliefs and stuff like that, that's got to be parked at the door. It can't be muddled up with trying to search for the truth.
Because she does make the statement that the masters are the greatest philanthropists on earth.
Right.
And we know that today there are a whole bunch of great philanthropists also on earth. But what is it that they're doing with all those billions of dollars? They're the ones who decide how it is going to be spent. Are we relieving the burden of the poor, or they're going all over the place and doing what it comes necessary to them? For instance, building aircraft to go to the moon now we're going to harvest
Yeah.
resources from the moon.
Yeah.
Is that for the benefit of humanity? But there must be some definition as to what that philanthropy is based on.
The philanthropy you're talking about, that has to be developed from inside out. And when we're talking about the masters, they cannot do that for us. They can help set the stage. That's as far as they can go. And you're talking about what's really happening in the world. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. It was just mind-boggling to me is to realize that when we were talking, looking at these videos in PBS, they were showing Return to the Moon and things like that, and you kind of alluded to that. We've plundered the earth, and now we're talking about going to the moon and plunder that too. Well, that's what it sounds like, and it's a concern.
Well, this is the definition of that nucleus has a broader implication to it, is what this student is referring
Absolutely.
to. You cannot just haphazardly go about, okay, we have decided now we're going to do it this way. This is a definite route that one has to follow,
Sure.
because truth is at the basis of it.
Mm-hmm.
And other people might perceive truth at different levels. HPB says there are different parts to that truth, but in the end, truth will stand time, space, and anything else, because it is one.
Absolutely. This gets sometimes above that, which is where humanity is.
Well, it's just a process.
We have as wonderful as science is, it's purely it keeps this part out.
It's on the material plane.
Yeah.
However, she also says that science is 1,000 times or 100 times better than dogmatic religion.
Absolutely.
Because in the future,
Yeah.
she says, when the keys are given to scientists who are ethical, they will show the truth in that secret doctrine, that
Mm-hmm.
it will actually be brought to the physical plane as well.
They have proved correct, good bit of these specifics in here in the last 100-odd years.
Yeah.
There's a major movement in the 1800s that the general population has forgotten or never knew or something that occurred. It culminated in this understanding with the publication of these books, which was never made available to the public at large until then.
Well,
And
there's a Harvard.
a lot of people have never heard of this.
Well, there was a Harvard club that
Right.
used to read the secret doctrine and try to digest the information in it. I don't know whether it is still in place or
I've
not.
heard about that
But they
Harvard
used to
club.
write in the book themselves and then order another book.
Mm-hmm. Put
Scrutinize it.
margin notes in there.
But I have not heard
Have
anyone.
meetings and have discussions about it. Yeah.
I have not heard anyone giving credit to that book, even though their scientific discoveries are as a result of it. They don't acknowledge.
Yeah, Einstein had a copy of The Secret Doctrine at his bedside, but I'm not aware that he's ever mentioned that. He talked about light a lot. There's a lot about light in these two books here. So it provides a basis for talking about a nucleus. That's, for the inquiring mind, for the person who has a lot of imagination. That's what I think why Einstein got this stuff out of his books that he did. And he carried it into science. He made it science. Got a Nobel Prize for it and all that. That's not the reason why he did it. He did it because he thought it was an important thing to study. Our hour is up, and next week we'll have another presentation on
True morality.
true morality. Okay. So it's like an important, they're all important. Please join us then. We're going to Also next week we have the afternoon meeting where we're studying the Bhagavad Gita.